Good evening. This is another video in the series on evolution as the basis of faith. We will now continue to discuss the advent of the people of Israel as the prototype, as the model of the humanity being. So we saw that the very essence of the Jewish people would be a nation that would uphold the ideals of the divine idea, walk in the light of God. And we see that the very essence of the struggle of humanity, of the humanity being to appear, to evolve, centers around human morality, the morality of the human public, and the trend, the force pushing evolution is pushing for the appearance of a humanity being that is capable of both securing human freedom and human individualism, while at the same time utilizing and exploiting the enormous power that the human public has, that all of us taken together, what we do together as people united, we move the world. There's nothing that we do alone. Everything is in our interaction with other people, and as we become more and more specialized, this becomes even more evident that it is the whole and the part, and they must work together harmoniously. So the great revelation of divinity in the world was not individual, but public. It was a whole public, a multi-being, a humanity being that stood before Mount Sinai, a whole nation. Thus, in the face of the world, at the very root of history, God tells Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, because with a strong hand he will send the Jewish people from his land, and with a strong hand he will expel them from his country." Since the very day that the human creature became aware, from the day that he has this spirit, this ability to talk, to speak, to enunciate ideas and symbols, the arena of evolution has been shifted from the material to the spiritual, from the matter into the realm of the ideas. The spirit is the enlivening force. It is what makes cultures. The thoughts of people shape their reality. And what God did to Pharaoh is first and foremost a model for the generations, a means of influencing the consciousness of future peoples, future nations. And God says this explicitly in Exodus, "I have hardened his heart and the heart of his slaves. And the reason I did this is so that you tell your son and your son's son what I did to Egypt, and the marks that I put in them, and thus you shall know that I am God." The real struggle is not the immediate release of the people of Israel from Egypt, for this could have been done without the 10 strikes against Egypt, without the 10 plagues that came upon Egypt. The true struggle is the struggle of consciousness. It is the struggle over the story that will be told the sons. The special narrative, this frightening narrative, in which the greatest and most adored human civilization of that time, the great Egypt, the great builder of pyramids, the great civilizations, the great civilization that casts its shadow upon the whole world, now bows its head before the people of Israel through this mighty force that demands freedom, that demands release. This demand for freedom, that is the essence of it. And this is why all the blows came upon Egypt. Because not for Egypt, for the next generations, for the knowledge that God is working in the world to establish the freedom of nations. But, Rabbi Kook writes, matters went awry, and the spirit of humanity became so low in general, to the point that the secular could no longer become a basis for the sanctified, for the sacred, unless it destroys the sacred. And for this reason, the expulsion, the exile in Egypt came and forced Israel to go into a place where its human aspect was melted in a way, was abraded by the woes of Egypt, and what was left was the national identity. The individual was stripped away in slavery, and this awareness of common plight created the essence of a nation, the nation of Israel, until a new being was born, and its secular image became completely obliterated, because there was no power. A slave has no power, no sovereignty, nothing. And all that is left is something very in essence. And a new nation was born by this process that was a new shape, a shape that was completely Israel. It was like the essence of this nation became was born within Egypt. This new being casts off the terrible corruption of the proto-humanity being, of ancient civilizations, and places a new model upon the stage of civilization. The light of God, says Rabbi Kook, is a fire that eats up the nations, and they pass from the world. Their shape is erased. To create a more whole, a better national shape. It is a transformation. We know that civilizations rise and fall, and their inheriting civilizations take up what was good in the dying one and create new forms, new shapes that fall again. Only in Israel does the national form reach its place of rest, and and providence lies in Zion, and God's fire that is held, that is fed by the Jewish people enlivens them and places them, puts them on their feet. And it is, this light becomes a glowing light that warms and illuminates and no longer burns. The Jewish nation is not burned by its contact with God. And you who cleave unto God, your Lord, live, all of you, today. Because the Jewish nation has a remedy for life for the entire world in the national sense. This is something that is known in evolution, that one shape is erased and a new one arises, and one nation is erased and a new one arises, but suddenly there appears on the stage of history a nation that is not erased, a nation that is alive and active and is so robust that crisis after crisis it survives the waves of history. This has not been seen in the world outside Israel, this dispersion of a nation that yet retains its identity. And this is due to the name of God that is embedded within the nation, and the life-giving remedy of the living Torah, the teaching, the great teaching that lives within them. The congregation of Israel is the essence of the entire cosmos, writes Rabbi Kook. And in this world, this essence lies in the very nature of the Israeli nation, its materiality and spirituality, its history and its faith. The congregation of Israel is the supreme spiritual revelation of human existence. In the same way as one should not wonder over the fact that in the mind and the heart there are unique revelations of life that one does not find anywhere else in the body, so one should not wonder over the fact that certain revelations of life, of wonders, of miracles, of prophecy, of Holy Spirit in its greatest manifestations, the eternal hope, the victory over any adversity, that are revealed in a way that is surprising and amazing to anyone who seriously looks at this nation. The congregation of Israel is the revelation of God's arm in the world, God's arm, God's force working in creation and in the building of nations. So this humanity being, in Israel, humanity being, Israel constitutes a model of how the humanity being looks when it is in direct contact with the driving force of evolution, with God. And this model serves to show how the balance between the private and the public, the individual and the group, the one and the many, can be found only through the divine idea, the divine ideals, the idea of justice and charity, of goodness and wisdom. And this idea must be embedded on a national scale, not the individual, the many, because the humanity being is the many. And we shall see in the next videos, when we go into the great arguments surrounding evolution, and when we will discuss religions and the way they approach the divine, we will see that the great error is to go back to the one instead of the many, to the single idol instead of the supreme force that enlivens the entire universe, the God of gods, the great Almighty, which is the God. And we see that once religions go back from this idea, they try to capture the idea of God, but they miss the idea of the national God, of a whole nation joined with God. And this makes the justice and charity become a public thing. But we shall see this in the next installments.